At 0418 on June 13, 1944, the sky over the English Channel is still black. Low cloud hangs at 1,500 feet, and the sea below is a sheet of dull metal. On the radar scopes along the Kent coast, a new kind of track begins to appear. Small, fast, steady, and coming in low. At 0422, the RAF Newchurch, a forward airfield on the Romney Marsh, Flight Lieutenant Tom Hargreaves, 24 years old, sits in his cockpit with the canopy slid back. He is soaked in sweat under his Mae West and parachute harness, despite the cold. His aircraft is a Hawker Tempest V, a heavy fighter with a 2,000 horsepower Napier Sabre engine and 4 20mm Hispano cannons in the wings. He has been on readiness for hours. He has heard the rumors. German pilotless aircraft. Something that doesn't turn back. Something that doesn't need a man inside it. At 0422, the scramble bell rings. Ground crew yank the chocks. Hargreaves slams the throttle forward. The Tempest surges, tail lifting almost immediately, the prop biting hard into wet air. He keeps it straight with firm rudder pressure, eyes flicking between runway edge lights and the far end of the strip. The engine is loud enough to drown out everything. The canopy comes down. The world narrows. At 0424, he is airborne, climbing through 600 feet, then 1,200, turning east toward the coast. The controller's voice cuts through the static. Diver, 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 Vector 105, Angels 2, target speed 400. Hargreaves has heard the code word before. Diver is what the RAF has begun calling these new threats. The warning is short because there is no time. The track is already close, already committed. At 0427, he levels at 2,000 feet and pushes forward again. The Tempest accelerates past 350 miles per hour. He keeps the nose slightly down. He needs speed. This is not a dogfight. This is a pursuit. Then he sees it. At 0429, a faint orange glow appears ahead and below, moving with unnatural steadiness. Not a navigation light, not an exhaust flame from a piston engine. It is a long, thin dart with straight wings, cutting across the dark like a thrown knife. Behind it, a bright, pulsing tongue of flame flickers in a tube on its back. The sound arrives a second later, mechanical, harsh, and irregular. A buzzing like an engine that's failing but refuses to die. Hargreaves closes in. He is now within 800 yards. In the first seconds, his brain tries to classify what he is seeing. It looks like an aircraft, but it doesn't fly like one. No evasive movement, no changes in altitude, no wobble. It just keeps coming, driven forward by that pulsing flame. This is a V-1 flying bomb, a German weapon built to do one thing: cross the channel and slam into a target area with an 850-kilogram warhead. It is propelled by a pulsejet, a crude engine that gulp-breathes air in rapid bursts. It does not need a pilot. It does not need a radio operator. It does not need to return. It only needs to reach London. At 0431, the controller's voice is tight. Target now passing Dungeness. You are cleared to engage. Repeat, cleared to engage. Hargreaves shifts his hands, left on the throttle, right on the stick. He thumbs the gun safety. He knows what he is carrying: 4 cannons, each capable of firing explosive shells at hundreds of rounds per minute. A short burst can rip through metal and fuel lines and control surfaces. A short burst can also detonate an 850-kilogram warhead if he's too close. He has been warned about that. The briefing has been blunt. Do not sit behind it. Do not fire from point-blank range. If it blows, it can take you with it. and if it survives your first pass and reaches land, it will fall among civilians. At 0432, he is within 400 yards. The Tempest is now near 400 miles per hour, the airframe vibrating slightly. He slides right to come alongside, aiming not at the warhead, but at the wing root and the engine area. He doesn't want to turn it into a bomb in the sky. He wants to stop it. He fires. The cannon hammer. The aircraft jolts as recoil shudders through the wings. Tracers streak forward and disappear into the dark. The V-1 shivers, sparks throwing off its fuselage. For a half-second, it keeps going, stubborn and unchanged. Then, the pulsejet cuts out. The sudden silence is worse than the noise. When the pulsejet cuts out, it means the V-1 has reached its preset distance. Its fuel supply has stopped. Its simple control system has decided it is time to fall. The weapon pitches down slightly, and Hargreaves feels his stomach drop with it. The bomb is now a living object with a live warhead. At 0433, he breaks away hard, banking left and climbing. He does not look back at first. He keeps his speed. He puts distance between himself and the falling weapon. A few seconds later, he glances over his shoulder. The V-1 is diving toward the dark landmass of the coast. There is no explosion yet, just the shape falling like a dead bird. On the ground, civilians will later describe what they heard. The buzzing engine approaching, then the abrupt cutoff, then a brief pause, sometimes 10 seconds, sometimes less, before the blast. That pause becomes a psychological weapon all its own. People learn to fear the silence. By daylight, the British will understand that this is not an isolated incident. The V-1 is not a single new aircraft. It is a system. In the weeks leading up to June 1944, German units in northern France have been preparing launch sites, ramps angled towards Britain, supplied by trucks carrying bombs that weigh more than 2 tons each. The V-1 itself is roughly 8 meters long, with stubby wings and a simple guidance package, gyroscopes to maintain heading, a crude altitude system, and a propeller-driven counter to measure distance. It is not precision in the modern sense. It is area attack, a weapon aimed at cities. The timing is deliberate. The Normandy landings have begun. The Germans cannot stop the Allied armies on the beaches with one dramatic stroke, but they can still reach London. They can still force Britain to divert aircraft, ammunition, radar coverage, and manpower away from the front. They can still punish the population and test morale. The British response is already being organized under a defensive plan with a simple goal: intercept the weapon before it reaches the city. Fighter squadrons like Hargreaves will be moved to the coast, operating in near-constant readiness. Anti-aircraft batteries will be repositioned and upgraded. Barrage balloons will be raised in belts to snag low-flying threats. Radar stations will focus on the narrow band of fast-moving targets crossing the channel at a predictable height. But on this first morning, at 0434, none of those systems feels certain. What Hargreaves has just engaged is unlike anything he has been trained to fight. No pilot to outthink, no engine to cripple in a way that forces a landing, just a flying warhead with a timer in its bones. He turns back toward the coastline, scanning the horizon for the next glow, the next buzz. Because the tracks on the radar scopes are not fading, they are multiplying.
War documentary. At 0441 on June 13, 1944, Flight Lieutenant Tom Hargreaves is back over the coast, flying a shallow racetrack pattern at 2,500 feet. The controller keeps feeding him bearings. The radar picture is cluttered now, multiple fast targets in a narrow corridor, all moving west-northwest at roughly 380 to 400 miles per hour. At 0444, he sees the next one, another orange glow, another buzzing note, like a motorbike trapped inside a metal drum.
He closes again. He is more cautious this time. The first engagement taught him what the silence means. At 0446, he lines up on the left rear quarter. He does not fire immediately. He watches the V-1's flight. It is steady but not smooth. There is a slight porpoising motion, the result of a simple autopilot fighting the air. The wings are short, the airframe thick. It looks like it was designed for mass production, not elegance. He squeezes the trigger for a half-second burst at 300 yards. The shells walk across the wing route. The V-1 jolts, tilts, and then keeps going. No cutoff, no flame out. It is still under power. Hargreaves cannot sit behind it. He cannot waste ammunition. He pushes closer, then slides up and alongside, careful not to fly into the turbulence off its wing. He tries something he heard in the briefing but has not practiced, the wingtip upset. At 0447, he edges his Tempest's right wing within a few inches of the V-1's left wing, close enough that a mistake will clip metal. He raises his wing slightly, creating a pressure differential that nudges the V-1's wing upward. It works, barely. The V-1 rolls a few degrees off level. Its gyroscopes fight to correct, but the correction is slow. The weapon drifts, then begins a shallow descending turn. It is no longer on a straight line toward London. Hargreaves breaks away. He does not watch where it hits. He cannot. The controller has already called another track. This is what the next hours become. Intercept, disrupt, breakaway, repeat. The Tempest is fast, but fuel is finite. Each chase burns time and endurance. The air is crowded with fighters on similar vectors. Tempests, Spitfire 14s, Mustangs, and night fighters later on. The rules are simple. Stop the flying bomb, avoid the blast, don't chase so far inland that you run out of options. By 0610, the sun is up and the threat is fully visible. The V-1s come in at a height band that makes them hard to hit from the ground early on, often around 2,000 to 3,000 feet, and their speed sits in the uncomfortable gap where older fighters struggle to catch them in level flight. Britain has fast aircraft, but not enough of them, and not everywhere at once. On the ground, the warning system learns in real time. At 0702, in a plotting room near the coast, women of the WAAF move markers across a board as radar reports come in. The V-1 tracks are shorter, straighter, and more predictable than manned bombers. No weaving, no feints. That predictability helps, but it also creates a harsh arithmetic. If a V-1 is not stopped early, it will reach a populated area quickly. And when it reaches that area, it does not need accuracy. A V-1 carries an approximately 850-kilogram high-explosive warhead in its nose. If it strikes a row of terraced houses, it can collapse walls, tear roofs off, and turn glass into shrapnel across a wide radius. If it hits a street market or a rail yard, it can kill dozens in seconds and keep killing with secondary fires. The German intent is not subtle. It is pressure. It is disruption. It is revenge. By June 14th, the British have counted enough impacts to understand the pattern. Most V-1s are being launched from the Pas-de-Calais area, across the shortest water route. The launch sites are not airfields, they are ramps, long, narrow structures hidden in woods or behind hedgerows, supported by fuel trucks, ammunition vehicles, and crews trained to work quickly. A V-1 is positioned on the ramp. Its pulsejet is started on the ground. Compressed air and fuel ignite in the tube. The engine coughs itself into life. Then a catapult system, steam or chemical, throws the weapon forward until it is airborne and under its own power. From that moment, it cannot be recalled. Britain's defense reorganizes around that fact. The response is layered, and it changes week by week as experience hardens into doctrine. Fighters are pushed forward to the coast. Anti-aircraft guns are repositioned into dense belts where they can engage the V-1s at the right altitude and range. Balloon barrages are adjusted to force the weapons into predictable corridors and higher flight paths. The guns matter more than many expect. By June 16th, Radar-directed anti-aircraft fire begins to improve, and not just for bravery. It's technical. Gun-laying radar tightens the aim. Predictors refine lead calculations against fast, steady targets. Ammunition supply is prioritized. Crews drill until their hands move without conscious thought. Even so, the margin is thin. A V-1 is smaller than a bomber, faster than a typical low-level raider, and it doesn't flinch. If you miss, it doesn't turn away, it keeps coming. For the pilots, the work becomes grinding and dangerous. At 0917 on June 17th, Hargreaves is called up again, now on his third sortie in 2 days. He has slept in short bursts, eaten when he can, and kept his flight gear on because alerts come at any hour. The Tempest's Sabre engine is powerful but temperamental. Ground crews fight oil leaks and overheating. A sortie might end not because the pilot is done, but because the aircraft is. At 0928, he catches a V-1 at low altitude over the channel. He is closing at only a small speed advantage, tens of miles per hour. That means the firing window is brief. He squeezes the trigger for a half-second burst at 300 yards. The shells walk across the wing route. The V-1 jolts, tilts, and then keeps going. No cutoff, no flameout. It is still under power. Hargreaves cannot sit behind it. He cannot waste ammunition. He pushes closer, then slides up and alongside, careful not to fly into the turbulence off its wing. He tries something he heard in the briefing but is not practiced, the wingtip upset. At 0447, he edges his Tempest's right wing within a few inches of the V-1's left wing, close enough that a mistake will clip metal. He raises his wing slightly, creating a pressure differential that nudges the V-1's wing upward. It works, barely. The V-1 rolls a few degrees off level. Its gyroscopes fight to correct, but the correction is slow. The weapon drifts, then begins a shallow descending turn. It is no longer on a straight line toward London. Hargreaves breaks away. He does not watch where it hits. He cannot. The controller has already called another track. This is what the next hours become. Intercept, disrupt, break away, repeat. The Tempest is fast, but fuel is finite. Each chase burns time and endurance. The air is crowded with fighters on similar vectors, Tempests, Spitfire 14s, Mustangs, and night fighters later on. The rules are simple. Stop the flying bomb, avoid the blast, don't chase so far inland that you run out of options. By late June, the British public starts to recognize the weapon by sound. People look up when they hear it. They run when the sound cuts out. Civil defense wardens learn to read the pause between silence and impact. Hospitals tighten their routines. Fire brigades prepare for multiple incidents in a single morning. The V-1 campaign becomes a war within a war, fought over rooftops, fields, and coastal water, measured not only in aircraft shot down, but in streets spared. For Hargreaves, it becomes personal. He is not defending a front line in France. He is defending homes. He is defending a city he cannot always see, but can always imagine, because every time he misses, someone else pays the price.
War documentary. At 11:03 on June 19, 1944, the warning comes in waves. Not one track, not two, a stream. In the operations room, the controller does not waste words. Multiple divers, same lane, height 2,000, speed 400. Hargreaves is already airborne, fuel at 70 gallons and dropping. He banks east and pushes the Tempest to the edge of what it will give him without overheating. The Napier Sabre is a brute, extraordinary power, but it runs hot and demands constant attention. The radiator shutters are set to keep the engine alive, even if it costs him a few miles per hour. At 11:08, he catches sight of the first V-1, then a second farther out, and then another glow beyond that. They are spaced out, one every few miles, like a conveyor belt. This is the problem Britain is now facing, not a single new weapon, but mass production applied to terror.
The V-1 is not built to win an air battle. It is built to be cheap enough that losing many still achieves results. Hargreaves chooses the closest target. He dives to build speed, then slides to the side to avoid sitting directly behind it. The Tempest closes at a shallow angle. At 11:10, he fires from 350 yards. The shells strike low on the fuselage. The V-1 wobbles but stays powered. He curses once, short, controlled, and adjusts. He is running into a lesson every diver pilot learns. You can hit it and still not stop it. The V-1 structure is simple, and the pulsejet will keep running even when parts of the skin are torn away. To bring it down quickly, you need to destroy control surfaces, break a wing, or disrupt the guidance system enough that it dives early. At 11:11, he fires again, aiming at the wing root. This time the wing flexes, then snaps. The V-1 rolls hard and begins a steep spiral down toward open ground. Hargreaves breaks away and climbs. He cannot stop to watch. The second track is already closer to land. At 11:15, his controller warns him of a shift. Diver now crossing coast near Folkestone. That means seconds matter. The V-1 will be over built-up areas quickly, and then the consequences multiply. Houses, factories, rail lines, hospitals. Hargreaves pushes forward and sees it, lower than expected, about 1,800 feet, flames still pulsing. He is coming in fast, but the closing speed is not enough, not on a straight line, not with fuel and engine temperature limits. So he commits to a more dangerous approach. At 11:17, he drops below it, then pulls up to come alongside, almost level with the V-1's wing. He can see rivet lines, he can see scuffed paint, he can see the crude geometry of a weapon designed to be built quickly and thrown away. He edges closer, trying the wingtip upset again. At 11:18, the distance between his wing and the V-1's wing is measured in inches. He holds his breath without realizing it. A slight bump, metal on metal, could shear his own wingtip, and at 400 miles per hour, there is no recovery. He lifts his wing gently. The airflow pushes against the V-1's wing, and the bomb rolls. The gyros attempt to correct. For a moment, the V-1 fights him. Then it loses. The weapon rolls further, nose dipping, starting a shallow dive inland that will end somewhere other than the city center. Hargreaves breaks away and climbs, hands shaking slightly now that the immediate tension has released. By June 21st, Britain's defensive system starts to change shape. The early days relied heavily on fighters because fighters could engage over water and open fields, but fighters are limited by fuel, weather, and pilot fatigue. The country cannot keep a permanent wall of aircraft over the channel. So the gun belt tightens. Anti-aircraft batteries, heavy guns with radar direction, and lighter guns for volume fire are concentrated in a corridor where V-1s are most likely to pass. Crews drill engagement sequences, acquisition, lead calculation, burst control. Ammunition trains move constantly. Searchlights and radar stations feed targets into command posts. The aim is to reduce the reliance on split-second fighter interceptions and move the burden to ground defenses that can stay on station all day. By June 24th, the results begin to show. More V-1s are being destroyed before they reach London, and the defenders start to understand the weapon's vulnerabilities. The V-1 does not evade. It does not vary speed much. It flies a predictable band of altitude. That predictability is a gift, if your gunnery and radar are good enough to exploit it. But the V-1 campaign is not static. The Germans adapt. At 23:40 on June 26th, the first night wave that week arrives heavier than expected. The V-1's pulsejet flame is visible in darkness, but the aircraft itself is hard to see until it's close. Some of the bombs fly lower, skimming under cloud and complicating radar plots. The night fighters and anti-aircraft guns have less margin. The defenses hold, but not perfectly. The next morning, the newspapers avoid details. The public learns anyway, through empty lots and boarded windows, and the smell of smoke that lingers in streets long after the fires are out. For the pilots, the cost is cumulative. At 06:55 on June 28th, Hargreaves watches a Tempest from another squadron go in after a V-1 that detonates too close. The explosion is mid-air, a bright flash and a rolling cloud, and then a dark shape tumbles out of it, an aircraft with a missing wing section, falling fast. There is no radio call, no time. The sea takes it. Hargreaves does not talk about it on the ground. Most of them don't. They drink tea, smoke cigarettes, and look at their hands. They listen for the scramble bell even when it's not ringing. At 09:03 on July 1st, 1944, Hargreaves is vectored to a track in clear daylight. The V-1 is over water, heading straight for Kent. He closes, fires carefully, and the flame sputters. The engine cuts out. And then, it does not dive right away. For a moment, it glides, silent, level, and moving faster than it looks like it should without power. The V-1's wing is efficient enough to carry it forward. The cutoff no longer guarantees an immediate descent. It only means the end is near. Hargreaves breaks away anyway. He does not gamble on the timing. He feels the shock of the explosion behind him a few seconds later. He exhales, long and slow, and then checks his fuel. He is down to less than 25 gallons. He turns back towards base. By mid-July 1944, the strategic picture begins to shift. The Allied armies are fighting their way out of Normandy. The front line crawls, then surges. That matters because many of the V-1 launch ramps sit in northern France, fixed sites that depend on roads, fuel, and time. As the ground war moves, those sites become vulnerable to capture or destruction. The Germans know it. The British know it. Everyone knows the clock is running. So the V-1 assault peaks before it changes form. Fighters and guns keep killing them, but the stream continues. The weapon is not winning battles in France. It is trying to win something else. Fear, disruption, the sense that nowhere is safe. And for men like Hargreaves, the fight becomes a relentless routine. Climb, chase, fire, break away, land, repeat. The missions blur together, but the stakes never do. One mistake is not just a personal failure, it's a crater in a street. At 19:12 on July 5th, he lands and shuts down, canopy open, engine ticking as it cools. A mechanic climbs onto the wing and points to fresh dents along the leading edge, shrapnel marks from a blast that was too close. Hargreaves stares at them without speaking. He understands what those dents mean. He is still alive by inches and seconds. And the campaign is not over.
At 05:20 on July 10th, 1944, the weather over the channel is clear enough for the sort of work the V-1 defenders prefer. Visibility out to 10 miles, a light haze over the water, cloud base above 4,000 feet. Hargreaves is airborne again, climbing to 3,000, then leveling and waiting for the next vector. The warning comes at 05:33. Another diver lane, another fast-moving track, another glow on the horizon. But by now, the defense is no longer improvising. It is becoming an organized machine. Along the south coast, the gun belt has thickened into a coordinated line, radar-directed heavy guns and rapid-fire light guns grouped so their fields of fire overlap. The idea is simple. Force the V-1s into a predictable corridor and destroy as many as possible before they reach built-up areas. Fighters like Hargreaves' Tempests still matter, but they are no longer the only barrier. They are part of a layered system. At 05:41, Hargreaves spots a V-1 at 2,200 feet, flame pulsing. He closes, but he doesn't rush. He knows the geometry now. He stays slightly high and to the side, fires a short burst at 300 yards and watches the wing route. The V-1 jolts, rolls, and starts to fall. He breaks away instantly. He counts again without thinking. 1, 2, 3. At 05:42, the explosion blooms behind him, distant enough this time that the shock reaches him as a soft shove. He checks his gauges, then scans for the next glow. The controller is already talking, already moving him toward another track. This is how July goes. Repeat engagements, constant readiness, and a slow shift in momentum as the ground war in France changes the V-1 war in the sky. By late July 1944, Allied forces have pushed deeper inland from Normandy. Northern France becomes less secure for German launch units. Fixed ramps, those long, angled structures hidden in woods, are discovered, bombed, or abandoned. The pressure eases in one sense because fewer V-1s are being launched from the closest point to England. But the campaign does not simply stop. It changes. At 21:50 on August 4th, Hargreaves is in the mess when a briefing officer lays it out in clipped sentences. German launch positions are shifting toward the Low Countries, and the pattern of arrivals is changing. Some V-1s are coming in on new lines. Some are being timed differently. The defenders cannot assume the same corridor every night. Then, later in the year, comes another adaptation: air launch. A V-1 can be carried under a bomber wing and released over the North Sea, turning the weapon into something even harder to predict. The air launch method reduces dependence on ramps and roads. It also pushes the intercept problem farther out, into weather and darkness over open water. Hargreaves is still on diver duty when the first of those air-launched threats becomes a real operational concern. The tactics shift again. Night patrols become more important. Coordination with radar and coastal observers tightens. The war against a pilotless bomb becomes a war of detection and timing. At 03:12 on September 1st, 1944, a night controller vectors him into darkness over the water. There is no glow at first, just the faint, intermittent buzz that comes and goes with distance and wind. He hunts by instrument and instinct, using brief visual cues when the flame flickers into view. He does not fire until he is sure of his range. The risk of a mid-air detonation at night, with no horizon and no reference points, is higher than ever. At 03:18, he fires a short burst. The buzz stops. The weapon glides silently for a few seconds. Hargreaves breaks away instantly. He counts again without thinking. 1, 2, 3. At 03:19, the explosion blooms behind him, distant enough this time that the shock reaches him as a soft shove. He checks his gauges, then scans for the next glow. The controller is already talking, already moving him toward another track. This is how July goes: repeat engagements, constant readiness, and a slow shift in momentum as the ground war in France changes the V-1 war in the sky. By late July 1944, Allied forces have pushed deeper inland from Normandy. Northern France becomes less secure for German launch units. Fixed ramps, those long, angled structures hidden in woods, are discovered, bombed, or abandoned. The pressure eases in one sense because fewer V-1s are being launched from the closest point to England. But the campaign does not simply stop. It changes. At 21:50 on August 4th, Hargreaves is in the mess when a briefing officer lays it out in clipped sentences. German launch positions are shifting toward the Low Countries, and the pattern of arrivals is changing. Some V-1s are coming in on new lines. Some are being timed differently. The defenders cannot assume the same corridor every night. Then, later in the year, comes another adaptation: air launch. A V-1 can be carried under a bomber wing and released over the North Sea, turning the weapon into something even harder to predict. The air launch method reduces dependence on ramps and roads. It also pushes the intercept problem farther out, into weather and darkness over open water. Hargreaves is still on diver duty when the first of those air-launched threats becomes a real operational concern. The tactics shift again. Night patrols become more important. Coordination with radar and coastal observers tightens. The war against a pilotless bomb becomes a war of detection and timing. At 03:12 on September 1st, 1944, a night controller vectors him into darkness over the water. There is no glow at first, just the faint, intermittent